Hi everyone, my name is Adam Horbert and welcome to Sunflower Woodworking. So in this episode, we're going to make some bandsaw boxes. We're going to have another episode. We're going to split this into two because there are quite a few things that we're making all at once. And we're working on a project for a business down in Galveston, Texas, named Amy Lane. Stacey and John are the owners down there. And great people, great store. If you ever have a chance to visit Galveston, stop by and see them. Now, one of the unique things about Amy Lane, they are a Christian store, and they have a lot of stuff that, Christian, non-Christian, they just have a lot of great things there. But one unique thing about their store is they've got a prayer wall. And when we were adopting our youngest son from Galveston, there were a lot of people praying for him and supporting him. And they told us about this store. We went down to the store and met Stacey and John and took a look around the store, and the unique thing about the store was this prayer wall. So there is a wall that anybody who comes to visit the store can take a tag and then write down a prayer and then hang the tag on this wall. The wall has probably couple hundred hooks on it, and there are hundreds of prayers, maybe even thousands of prayers on there. And then the staff in the store and other people come and pray over those who need prayers. And there are a lot of prayers for financial needs, for gift needs, for a lot of things. Of course, things like health and so many prayers. And we were thinking, well, with all these people that were praying for our son, how can we give back to this community? How can we do something for them? Not that they, asked us to, but we're like, well, we felt the Lord put it on our hearts to do so. So we set up a partnership with Amy Lane, and what we do is last year we sent, I think it was like 12 or 15 items down to the store, and then they sell these items, and then 100% of the proceeds go to the community. It goes to people's prayers, whether they need money for food or they need a gift for their daughter and they can't afford one, or just anything that this can go to help. And the folks there at Amy Lane can tell you more about kind of where it went. But we don't sell these to Amy Lane. They sell them to people who visit the store, and then they take the proceeds, 100% of those proceeds, and then find the different needs and provide for that. So here we are today, about to make another batch. We're making several things. We're making some angel and wing and fish boxes that they can then sell. These are for like putting keepsakes or whatever else you want inside of them. And then also some apple boxes. But the apple boxes we're going to put in another video because I tend to talk quite a bit. These videos are long enough without putting too much in them. So in this video, we're just going to focus on the angel and wing and fish boxes. And then we'll put together another video to walk you through making the apple boxes. So without any further ado, we're going to do some glue up. And then once the glue up's done, we're going to go ahead and show you how we start shaping those chunks of wood into bandsaw boxes. So let's get gluing. So the glue up's done, and we took the clamps off the slabs, and everything went pretty well. Very happy with that. Now we've got to shape it a little bit. Now I could put the templates on and just try and compensate for uneven edges and that, because as you can see, when we were milling or before the glue up, we didn't rip the edges of the boards and make them straight, because oftentimes you still have uneven edges. Not in terms of the depth, they all be nice and flat, but some boards are wider than the others. So over time decided in our process, we just laminate them, glue the boards together, and then after we glue them together, we will shape it to create the slab that we need. Now, I could just use the templates on here and compensate for these ridges and these recesses, but found that at least by starting with something that is fully square, takes the guesswork out and avoids any kind of miscalculations or mistakes. Not that that's ever happened before. So what I'm going to do is, on the bandsaw here, going to make these square. Using the bandsaw because, doing it on the table saw, I have two different slabs that I've got to shape. The blade's not going to reach on the other slab. So what I do here on the bandsaw is I take a slab of 3/4 inch birch ply. You see with all these layers, the birch ply tends to stay straight and true sitting in my lumber cart. So if you look at the edge of this board on both sides, there's ripples, there are recesses, there's some glue. And what I do is I put the slab against the birch ply, and it's kind of like the law of averages, right? So it's the average thickness of the parts that stick out in the recesses, and I will move this into the blade up there, holding this all together, and that will give me a nice straight edge on this side here. And then I'll take that board off and just use the fence. Now that I have one straight edge, I'll use the fence, take this board, the birch ply off, and then just use the fence to guide the next cut to shape the other side. And then I will use my miter gauge to square off the ends. So let's get cutting. So after we got the blocks all squared up, went ahead and started marking up the blocks for the next set of cuts. So she had picked one wing design and I had picked another. So basically we take these templates, and there's a set of two, and put them back to back and then trace the outline for now. So as you can see, we got the one set here and the other set there, and I'll cut the outer shape, and then what we'll do later, well, you'll see what we're going to do with that later. But then we had this chunk left over here, so I took a sticker that I had in the shop of the fish. So if you know what the fish stands for. And I was like, well, that'd be a cool little box. So we took the sticker, took a scrap piece of birch ply, and made a template, and then just drew two of those on here. So we take the scrap, we maximize the use of the wood, and now we've got two more products that we can send to our friends at Amy Lane. So now we got everything marked up, at least for the initial cuts. For the apple boxes, I'll probably just keep using the 1/4 inch blade that I've got in there to make those cuts. But then for the wings and the fish boxes, I'm going to change out the blade probably to an 1/8 inch because I have some tighter curves in that in there, and I want to make sure I can get the blade around it. Maybe even to the 3/16 blade. Going to play with it, going to measure some of these curves, and then see which blade is going to be better servicing the actual cuts. So, as always, let's get cutting. All right, so we've got our blocks cut out for the apple boxes. And then we did a rough cut to separate the two angel boxes, and then also to separate the two fish boxes. Uh, so there's our 4 boxes for apples. And then after we did the rough cut to separate these 4, we then did the fine tuning, the finer cuts. You can see the templates on top. And take the template off, and there you go. That's the one box. And then take the template off of this one, and there's the other. And then, of course, the 2 fish boxes from our template. So we have now 2 of those. We could probably go to at least sanding the outer edges of the angel boxes, but got some things we want to think through, because the original design was just one solid box, one solid piece of wood, laminated wood, but one solid box. But what we're thinking too, as maybe something new to do, is to cut out these pieces in the middle and insert a different type of wood there for both boxes. This one would be just the one piece up here, and this one would have one piece here, one piece here. It's pretty tricky because we'll have to, of course, mark it and then cut that out. And then at the same time, we've got to mill another piece the same thickness and then mill it to the same shape so that it fits precisely. Not that it can't be done, but it was basically an idea. Had to try that out. Not sure yet. I need to do a little thinking and praying on that one before we actually attempt that, because if it doesn't meet up the right way, yeah, we can keep sanding and milling, but we just want to make sure that the value that we're putting into it is what the customer is going to receive, that it's going to create an experience for them as they look at this box and they use it, because we do have some pretty cool things we are going to do to these boxes, these angel boxes, with the wings, with some new techniques that we're working out and learning. So after conferring with the boss, what we decided to do was to do the inlays inside of the wings. So what that means is we're going to cut out those parts out of the wings, because right now it's a solid block. So we're going to cut out those gaps where, if there were wings and they were sitting together, they're obviously not one solid shape. So we're going to put a small piece of a different species of wood in between to show the separation of the wings on the 2 wing sets. So after we do that, we're going to do some inlays, and a lot of different ways you can do this. The way that I'm going to try, so I haven't done it on something like this before. I have done inlays, but nothing shaped like this, so this is going to be new territory. But what I'm going to try doing is, after I cut the holes and sand them out a bit and get them cleaned out, I'm going to put the pieces back together, not gluing, because we got to glue those pieces in there, but at least press them back together and then put them over a block of material that's the same thickness or thicker than the wings, the angel wing boxes themselves. And then trace, use a very sharp pencil, try to trace the inside of the hole, and then use the bandsaw to cut that out, and then the oscillating spindle sander to shape it and fine tune it into the shape that's going to fit in that hole. Right? So a lot of explaining. Let's actually see what that looks like in practice. Let's get cutting. So I had to do the inlays a couple times. First time, didn't take my own advice, and I tried to trace from the scraps, and that didn't work so well. So the second time around, I actually traced from the hole itself. That worked much better. Still some little air gaps, but then using some glue and some of the sawdust, filled that in, and it looks pretty solid. So what we do now is, now that it's all glued up and unclamped, Now we are going to cut the bandsaw boxes. Right, so there are a few steps to making a bandsaw box after you have your block shaped the way you want it. In this case, wings and angels and fish. So what we're going to do now is, after we sanded, we are going to take it to the bandsaw and we're going to shave off the top and bottom surfaces. So what we do with the bandsaw box is we're going to cut out the inside, but we don't want it to really look like we cut out the inside. So what we do is we cut off the top, cut off the bottom, and that gives us a nice solid surface. And then after we cut that out, we're going to use a scribing tool to actually mark the inside where we're going to cut. But let's cut the tops and bottoms off first, mark them up so we remember which one goes where, and then we'll come back and do the next step. Okay, so we cut the tops and bottoms off. Great reminder when working with rounded stock on the bandsaw, the blade is going down at speed, and anything that's round it's going to want to take with it. So got to keep hold and purchase on the back, on the back side of it so it doesn't pull it forward, but keeping aware that it's going to keep wanting to pull that forward. Even with these wings not being completely round, having flat spots, it starts off where one part is, kind of higher, and there's a little piece on the bottom down here hanging off. And then as you cut through and get to the blade, it wants to pull that last piece down to the table. So got me a couple times, but got to be aware, got to remember what's going on, got to watch every single moment that the wood is in contact with the blade. Great reminders. Fortunately, no big mishaps, just little jerks. Put a little notch in the wood, but you know what? It was on the bottom of the box, and that's actually good. Because when it puts a little notch, then we have a good reference point when we glue those bottoms back on together after we do the sides. Right, let's move on. So now we're going to take I had it here a second ago. There it is. Now I'm going to take a scribing tool like this, and I'm going to mark off the inside cut of the box, right? So this is where we're going to take off that inside material, and so that we've got an actual box inside. So let's see what that looks like. So started off using a scribing tool, but haven't used it in a while. So I very quickly remembered why I only use it on certain types of projects. Now, what's nice about the scribing tool, you can put a knife on it, you can put the lead filaments that come with it on it, and it helps give you a consistent marking. However, when you are scribing on something like this, that's an irregular shape and it has ripples and ridges and different tapers, very quickly reminded, well, that doesn't always work because it started to make that line too close to the edge where these little wave cuts come in, which would make that part too weak, or in the unlikely event of a little bit of a mismovement on the cutting part, it could get the saw blade end up coming out the side. So we want to make sure we got enough meat on this edge so we can navigate the bandsaw blade, and so that it's nice and strong, so it becomes a long-lasting box. And the other thing is, we picked this for the wing templates. I picked this style of wing because it does have a heart shape, and then when you open up the box on the inside, the cutout intentionally did it in the shape of a heart. So, love this box, pun intended. And looking forward to cutting and finishing this one. So now that we got all the boxes marked up, it's that magical time. Put it on the bandsaw and let's get cutting. right, so we got the centers cut out. As you can see, we got a stack of the centers back there. That's not scrap, that's undetermined use wood. So we'll use that for something in the future. Now, one thing to keep in mind when you're doing a bandsaw box and you're trying to hide that seam is figuring out where's your entry point. Where are you going to enter the wood? So on each of the boxes, I took a look at the grain. I try to follow the grain with my cut to get into the box. So in this case here, you can see right there, I followed that grain, just follow the grain right in. And I put it in, kind of the most inconspicuous spot I could find on each of the boxes. Some were easier than others. So these, once I glue that back together, it's going to hide it right behind this this curve right here. So if I get it lined up right, and the teeth marks, we don't sand these joints because the teeth marks actually give us a good template for getting those re-adhered. So we can actually, you can't feel it on the camera or in the video, but when I move it, I can feel the wood get seated into the grooves where the bandsaw blade was, which is always nice. All right. And the other thing you saw me cut was another layer off that block that was on the inside. This is going to be the inside of the lid. And what that's going to give us is this nice piece that's going to help the lid more or less seat roughly in place. There is a little bit of play because of the curve of the blade. It took out more material, so this is going to be a little bit smaller than the box. Some of that is taken up, some of that extra space is taken up by this glue joint. So when we glue this, remember there used to be more wood in there, so it was like over here. So it's made the inside a little bit tighter. So take up a little bit of that extra play, but not all of it. So it's still going to move around just a little bit, but it's a nicer feel. It's a nicer quality feel when you actually set a lid down and it seats where it's supposed to seat every single time. And the other thing is we're going to get our master flocker. We're going to put flock on the inside of these boxes, which is I use crushed velvet flock. So it's a nice, very pretty, very soft cloth material. With that flock, the reason I say that flock will put a little bit of a buildup around the edge. So then between that and this piece sitting on the lid, it's going to seat. Again, still a little bit of play, but it's going to seat very nicely and feel really nice. Right. The next stop in the journey is to get some glue on those cut joints and then wait 12 to 24 hours for that glue to cure. So let's get gluing. So it's an interesting thing about glue ups when it comes to the outer edges of the bandsaw box, because sometimes you've got to use a combination of clamps to get those seams to come back together. So, I mean, you cut the seam where you cut it so that it's hidden once it's glued up, but some of them are a little difficult to glue up. So for example, on the fish, it took 3 clamps to apply enough pressure to the glue joint down here in the right angle and the right way so that the glue surfaces were pushed together. With the angel boxes, these were a little bit easier. So these trim clamps were actually very useful for that purpose and holds together that edge very nicely. And then these here, it was just 1 clamp to hold these together because there's 2 flat pieces and there's enough flat surface on both of these edges for the clamp to hold on to. See, that was the problem with this one. So there's a flat surface down here, there's a flat surface down here, which then puts, you can put pressure to close that gap. However, because these walls are thin, as you start to put pressure from the front to the back, it causes the sides to bow outward, which can cause it to crack. But then also the lip for the edge here, it starts to become a V. So you have the back surface is adhering and holding on, but the front surface of the cut is lifted up because of the bow. So then I had to squeeze these in to bring that bow back down. And then finally then with that, there's still a little bit of a gap, so I needed this bar clamp here in order to bring the pressure back down so that it has a good purchase, so that the glue actually dries in the right, with the wood in the right spot. Because for those who are new to woodworking, or just a reminder for all the ones that have been doing it for quite some time, glue needs pressure. The wood glue needs pressure, a certain amount of pressure, in order to cure correctly. Because it's often said that the bond between, with the wood glue, the bond between two joints with wood glue is stronger than the original wood itself. But it takes pressure, not too much pressure because then you'll squeeze out too much glue, but just enough pressure is that art, one of those art steps to the whole woodworking, woodworking process. You got to have the right amount of pressure, not too much pressure, squeeze out a little bit of glue, but not too much. All that doesn't come into balance to make a good, strong joint. Now, we do our best to make sure that these are glued up very nicely, but we also have the added advantage that once this glues up, we're going to glue the bottoms back on, which will give additional strength to that joint. We're not going to put a reliance on a step in the future. We're going to take care of this step the best we can, and then we're going to do the same thing and take as good care when we glue up the bottoms back on, take as good care as we can gluing that back up. So we are in waiting now, 12, 24 hours. I could have used the speed set glue. I didn't use the TB3 because with the hackberry, the speed set glue doesn't always adhere as well. So I used a Type Bond 3 on this. It gives us good adhesion. So back to the waiting game. See you guys soon. All right. Glue up is done. I took the clamps off already, and I think they look pretty good. So the seams are pretty solid. That's actually not the seam. That's where I joined the wood. So I'm going to fill that in a little bit later. But, if you look closely enough, you can see where the seam is because there's a little bit of a notch. But like on this one here, very difficult to see that seam anywhere. Same thing on all these other boxes, these little angel boxes. Very hard to see the seam. Now you can see the glue on the inside. But like I said, we're going to be doing flocking, so that'll cover that up. So what we're going to do next is actually mark, before we glue up the bottoms onto the sides, we're actually going to take the front piece, which this is already the front piece facing upward, and they're going to take a pencil and just mark around the inside. And we're going to do that for all of these. What that's going to do is that mark is going to be our gauge on where we're going to place this insert. And this insert is that piece we cut off from the insides, the leftover from the insides, and it's going to give us that ability to basically make it so that the lid, it's upside down, make it so that the lid sits nice and firmly on. When we put the lid on, it'll sit on the box nice and firmly, right? So it won't slip off and shake around. And then once we put the flocking on here, we'll show how to do that later, but once we put the flocking on here, the flocking will fill in some of that gap, will create, build up a little bit on the sides, and it'll make it just a little bit more snug. So the important thing is to get this plate placed in the right spot. So basically we just put the front cover on, position it with the sides the best possible way we can, put a pencil mark, and then we glue this on inside that pencil mark. All right, let's see what that looks like. All right, so we're all glued up with the covers and with the bodies of all the Bandsaw boxes. And here they all are. The angel boxes here, the lids over there, the fish boxes, the lids are in the back. The lids are right there. The lids for the two wing boxes, and then the wing boxes themselves. Now, one thing you will notice on these boxes is that there's a lip. Let me see if I can zoom in close enough so you can see it. So there's a lip right there, and that's expected. Why is there a lip on the edge of the bandsaw box? When I look at all these, all of them have a lip somewhere. It's because when we cut that center out, remember we've got to cut into the edge of the outer frame of the box so we can get to that gooey center, so we can cut that centerpiece out to make the box. So when you cut through that, obviously the blade has a kerf, a thickness, and that is then glued back together. And when you glue that back together, it brings the sides in and the top down a little bit. So it reshapes the box just enough to be annoying. So when you do the glue up, you start with the side that is opposite of the cut, line all that up, and then you're going to be left with that little bit of an edge. So what we're going to have to do after the glue's dry is sand that down and even that out again. Which with this type of box, or these types of boxes, the fish boxes will be relatively easy, but the other ones are going to be a little bit more challenging because of all the curves and edges and all the little crevices that we have to get into. But it's worth it because in the end, it makes a really nice looking box. And it looks like it's one solid piece of wood if we lined up those, the grain and lined up those boxes right. So the glue up is done, and we took all the clamps off on all the bandsaw boxes. And here they are in their raw form. So we've got this set of wings, which is a heart-shaped box as well. But we'll be doing some designs and things on here to pronounce the wings a little bit more. Another design for the wings. And like we said before, one side is going to be the side where we did the seam for the bandsaw box cut, which the seam is right there tucked behind that round piece. So the lid and the base are a little bit proud on this side. We're going to clamp that when we're sanding. We're going to sand that down flush. And again, that's from after we made that cut, the curve of the blade took away a little bit of material in there. So we had to squeeze that back and squeeze it up a little bit. And that, of course, shrank the size of the box body. But as you can see, the lids, the plate that we put on the back of the lid came out great. The markings were pretty good. It is just a tiny bit loose, but that's to be expected. But once we put the flocking and stuff in there later in the video, you'll see it'll tighten up just a little bit more and it'll be nice and firm. Angel boxes came out great as well as the fish boxes. Everything came out pretty good this time around. So the next step now is to get the sanders out, sand all these different pieces, all these different grooves, get everything back flush, clean them off, and then put the first coat of finish on them. So let's get sanding. So that was sanding. So we used the detail file sander, the random orbital sander, and some sanding sponges to get all the nooks and crannies, get everything smoothed out and evened out. So now we're going to move on to finish. Get everything set up here, and this time around we're going to use this Natura One Coat. It is a competitor to Rubio Monocoat, and on certain woods I prefer the finish of Rubio, but when it comes to hackberry like all these boxes are, and they just have a little bit of black walnut inlay, but they're mostly hackberry, and with hackberry it does very, very well. So we're going to use the Natura to do the hackberry. So just like with Rubio, sand it to well, actually, what's different between this and Rubio recommends 120, 150 grit for the final sanding before you apply the finish. This one recommends 80 to 120 grit. So we did 80 grit on the sanders, or on the random orbital sander, but then we went back with an 80 and 120 grit on the file sander and on the sanding pads to bring it within range for this particular finish. So what we'll do now is we'll apply the finish. We'll do it liberally using some syringes to mix the finish and the hardener. And then we will let it sit for the 15 minutes, again, just like we do with Rubio. And then we will wipe off the excess and then let it cure overnight. And then we'll come back tomorrow, check the finish, and then maybe do a second coat. So the finish is on, and we waited 15 minutes. Now, fortunately, with all these pieces and how many grooves and crevices we had to fill, by the time we got done with applying the the hard wax on everything, we only had to wait like 2 minutes before we could go back and start removing the excess with a cloth. As you can see, the hard wax really pulls out the grain, and hackberry has a lot of color variation in the grain, which is why we chose it for these boxes. And it looks really nice. Great blending, great texture. Now we'll just wait for it to cure, and then we'll make the decision on the second coat. But you may have noticed as well, the insides of the boxes don't have a finish. Now I can hear some of you thinking, well wait a minute, you got to put the same finish on both sides. Ish. This will get a finish. They'll get a different type of finish, probably in about 48 hours. We'll be using acrylic paint on the inside and then flocking them. And we'll have a special guest to show you how that looks. So there will be a finish on both sides of the wood. Does it have to be the exact same finish? I mean, it's better if it is. But to date, I haven't had a bandsaw box do any kind of warping or curling or cracking because I used acrylic on the inside and an oil-based finish on the outside. Haven't seen it. Haven't had any customers come back and say, hey, this is coming apart. So can't say it doesn't happen. In my experience, it hasn't happened. So we continue with the same process. So now that we're all done, we're going to take our rags and our sponges and the leftover oil, and we're just going to crumple it all up, soak that oil into the rag so it doesn't drip, and just throw it in the trash. Excuse me? No. You never throw your materials that you use to apply and soak up hard wax into the trash. Just like oils, boil linseed oil, tung oil, any other oil finish, there is a almost guarantee, but a strong possibility, nearly guarantee, that if you leave those oil-soaked rags just freshly soaked with oil and you leave them out crumpled up or put them in the trash, you're going to have a fire. So always, just to be safe, even to be on the safe side, always, number one, any cloth that you use, drain all of the oil out of it if it's soaked, put it into a safe place, spread out away from any other flammable materials, maybe even outside in the driveway if you got to, but keep it away from, put it out and keep it away from everything. Same thing with any sponges. Any sponges you use. So on this finish, I use car wax sponges sometimes for some of my oil and wax-based finishes. Cut them in half, and they're a great applicator. They soak up a lot of the material, and then whenever you need a little bit more, you just squeeze the sponge a little bit, and out it comes. And it doesn't have any fuzz in it, any kind of threads or fibers that will get stuck in the grain or get stuck in the odd corner and things like that. Squeeze out all the oil, and then as an added step, what I do is I fill my container that I mix the oil in. I fill that with water. I put the sponge in there. I will soak the cloth with water, and then I'll put them away from any other flammable materials and for a day or two, usually. So after giving the finish some time to cure, what I decided was it turned out pretty good. There's nothing wrong with it. The texture isn't where I want it to be, and the depth of that grain isn't where I want it to be yet. So what I mean is it's still a little bit rough on the surface. So I am going to take a paper bag to it. If you don't know the paper bag technique, I use it all the time. You just take a paper sandwich bag or lunch bag, crumple it up a little bit, and then you use it to kind of sand the outer surface, and it takes out any little pieces of dust that got stuck in the finish or any rough spots, and it smooths it out a little bit without really taking off too much material in the sanding or affecting the finish. But you can see the depth of the grain that the hard wax really helps come through. It still looks a little flat for my liking. And normally what happens when you put a second coat on, it causes a little bit more depth in that grain where it gives you a little bit more of a visual effect. So after looking at all the boxes, the pronunciation of the grain is really beautiful. I love it. It really brings out the character of the wood, but I want a little bit more depth. So we're going to go ahead and do a second coat of the Natura hard wax on this. So not going to show you guys how that goes. You saw the first coat go on, but you can see in any of our other videos about the paper bag technique because we use it all the time, and it's very, very basic. So I'm going to get that second finish, wait another 24 hours, and then we'll move on to flocking the boxes. Let's get finishing. I've got our master flocker, Khloe, here with me. Everybody say hi to Khloe.
Hi, Khloe.
And Khloe's going to walk us through the technique that we use for flocking, which we actually got from Alex Snodgrass. His wife uses this technique, and he demonstrated it on one of his videos. So we've adopted it, and it's worked out great. The stuff that we use is a crushed felt flock that you can get online. I'll try to remember to share the link in the description. But Khloe's going to walk us through the process for flocking. You ready, Khloe?
Mm-hmm.
All right, let's see how it's done.
All right, so we've got a paintbrush and white water-based acrylic paint because underneath the flock, there's I don't know if you can see on these, but there are tiny, tiny little gaps. You can't really tell. You would be able to if it was a different color paint. But underneath the flock, we put red paint, so then it blends really well. And then, so we're doing that with white too, because we're using white flock. We've got, you're gonna paint, not a thin coat, but not like a super thick coat, so just here, I'll show you. Kind of like that thick. And then you're gonna do the whole thing, and then you're gonna put it in the bag with some flock, and then you're gonna leave a little bit of air so the flock can move around, and then you're just gonna shake it and try to get as much flock in the edges or just all over the box.
Well, you were saying something about how you do the edges towards the top, because there's finish up there where the edge of the paint and flock is going to meet.
Yeah, so it's kind of easy. You just kind of get a lot more paint and then just blend it upwards, and then you're just going to press the paintbrush up so the extra paint kind of goes up there, and then it makes a nice clean edge, and you just kind of do that around, but it does leave those little splotches, so you're going to just
feather it in.
Yeah.
Okay. tips and pearls of wisdom from Khloe, who's now going to show us her flocking. Take it away.
Right.
Let's get flocking. So we're in the final stages for the angel boxes. So the flocking is all done, everything's dried, and Khloe did an awesome job as always getting those flocked. So what do we have left? So we got the boxes here, and we got our bench grinder out and put our buffing claws on there. So what we're going to do next is we're going to put a coat of paste wax. Now we did use a hard wax finish on these, which turned out great. I always like to, for things that are going to be handled a lot, like boxes and other things, I like to put a coat of paste wax on there just to add a little bit more texture to it, so when you feel it, it's nice and smooth and feels great in the hand. And it also, if it's going to be in a store, it's going to be handled a lot. People picking it up, looking at it, getting oils from our hands on it and things like that. So it adds one little bit of layer of protection onto it. Then we use our bench grinder, turning it up to full speed. We learned a long time ago that if you put it on a lower speed, which feels safer, it actually causes the motor to heat up because it's not venting as much heat. So we keep it up all the way up on high. We've got these buffing cloths on either end through these spindles. And then we just, once we give the paste wax some time to dry, we'll go in there with the bench grinder with the buffing pads and then buff it out, which sometimes just with only putting one coat, you're not going to get a lot of shine off of it oftentimes. But it'll add just a little bit more shine to it. Now, we did not put a glossy finish on this. We usually don't on a lot of our hackberry and some of our other woods. We don't put a big glossy finish on it. We want something more of a matte, maybe a semi-gloss at the best, at the most. So this will add just a touch more shine to the boxes. So let's get buffing. So that's it for this project. Now we do have a sister project that we're going to be working on today, but these are going to be packed up and shipped off to our friends in Galveston, Texas. And we hope that whoever buys these, that it brings them a lot of joy and brings them a lot of use for the years to come, and that any of the funds that are raised from the sale of these will help out the people in the Galveston community who have needs. So. So we're going to close it out as we always do with a brief prayer. So if you join me, Heavenly Father, we thank you for just everything, for these tools, for these resources, for connecting us with the folks at Amy Lane and Galveston. They have a heart for you, Lord, and we ask that you continue to bless their store, bless this shop, and bless all those who are touched by not just the things that you've helped us make, Father, but also for those who are going to benefit from these sales, that you bless them, and for all those prayers that are on the prayer wall, on that wall in Amy Lane in Galveston, that you answer those prayers. We lift those people up to you. We know that all things are possible through you and from you, and that you look after all those people who post on that prayer wall. Father, we ask that you look after all of our viewers, that we keep them safe, guide their craft, keep their cuts straight and their measurements true. And Father, we continue to worship you and give you praise for all that we have that is good in our lives, because it comes directly from you. And in Jesus' name we pray. Amen. All right. So thank you for joining us for this episode. Like I said, we have got other projects on the tables here, some more things that we'll be making for Amy Lane. So stick around, subscribe to the channel, hit the like button, leave us comments. We love to read the comments. We love to hear other ideas and what people think, and different ways we could do things. Keep it nice. I have thin skin. No. But yeah, leave us a comment, and we'd love to hear from you. Until next time, this is Adam with Sunflower Woodworking. Take care, and God bless.